You know, I'm trying really hard to appreciate summer, but it's making it very difficult. Hello, and welcome to, or back to, my channel. I'm Kit, and today we're going to discuss Harrison Butker's commencement speech. Before we get into it, I would like to note that I don't know Harrison, and these are my thoughts and opinions. That being said, thank you for clicking on this video, and I would like to give extra thanks to my patrons. Links to my socials and Patreon are below, along with sources and resources, and now, on to the reason we're all here. So Harrison Butker is a professional athlete, and he was invited to give the commencement speech at Benedictine University, and I would be willing to bet that we've all heard of it, even if we haven't heard it. I wasn't planning to give my thoughts on it, but it was requested I do so, and I do have thoughts. I've been to one graduation, my own, from high school, and I've been to one Catholic service, and I've seen the defense that he was just giving a Catholic talk to fellow Catholics, but, well, we'll get there. I'm going to remind everyone that I have a submission form linked below if you have any ideas for content or topics I should cover, and with that, let's get into it.
Ladies and gentlemen of the class of 2024, I would like to start off by congratulating all of you for successfully making it to this achievement today. I'm sure your high school graduation was not what you had imagined, and most likely, neither was your first couple years of college. By making it to this moment through all the adversity thrown your way from COVID, I hope you learned the important lessons that suffering in this life is only temporary. As a group, you witnessed firsthand how bad leaders who don't stay in their lane can have a negative impact on society. It is through this lens that I want to take stock of how we got to where we are and where we want to go as citizens and yes, as Catholics.
And that is where I'm skeptical of, he's just a Catholic giving a Catholic talk to fellow Catholics. He's not just encouraging them as fellow members of his religion. He's also speaking to them as citizens of our shared country. And yes, we all get to take active part in the US as American citizens, but while there are Catholics who are happy to live and let live, Harrison and his fellows are not one of them, and I don't want to live by Catholic rules, and I especially don't want to live by trad-cath rules. And if you're wondering what those are, oh, he'll tell us. It's almost like he doesn't trust his Catholic audience to be Catholic enough on their own. Do not take a shot every time either of us says Catholic.
One last thing before I begin. I want to be sure to thank President Minnis and the board for their invitation to speak. When President Minnis first reached out a couple of months ago, I had originally said no. You see, last year I gave the commencement address at my alma mater, Georgia Tech, and I felt that one graduation speech was more than enough, especially for someone who isn't a professional speaker. But of course, President Minnis used his gift of persuasion and spoke to the many challenges you all faced throughout the COVID fiasco and how you missed out on so many milestones the rest of us older people have taken for granted.
If only he had left it at that, talking about how they had missed some things us older folks took for granted, but if he had, we wouldn't be here.
While COVID might have played a large role throughout your formative years, it is not unique. Bad policies and poor leadership.
Am I to understand from his mention of poor leadership that he disagreed with lockdowns, social distancing, and masks? If so, what would he have had leadership do? Nothing? That's not leading. Also,
have negatively impacted major life issues, things like abortion.
Harrison considers himself pro-life. In fact, Live Action is selling the Harrison Butker Protect the Defenseless linen tie, but apparently he's pro-life only insofar as abortion. He's not pro-life when it comes to people already on Earth, at least not when it might require him to do something like wear a mask.
IVF, surrogacy, euthanasia, as well as a growing support for degenerate cultural values in media all stem from the pervasiveness of disorder.
And in one sentence, he summed up pretty much everything tradcasts are against. And this is what gets me about, he's just talking to other Catholics. Really? He thinks only Catholics shouldn't be allowed an abortion, IVF, surrogacy, euthanasia. He's cool with 2 men or 2 women getting married. He doesn't think any of the above should be outlawed for the whole country, Catholic or not. I doubt. The other thing that gets me is, this man is against abortion. If someone doesn't want a kid and they're pregnant, well, that's tough luck. This man is also against IVF and surrogacy. So if someone wants a kid and IVF or surrogacy is their only option, well, that's also tough luck. That's so twisted. I assume the thought process is that people who wanted an abortion will just give their offspring to people who need IVF, but adoption is not a solution to abortion. Pregnancy and parenthood are 2 totally different things.
Our own nation is led by a man who publicly and proudly proclaims his Catholic faith, but at the same time is delusional enough to make the sign of the cross during a pro-abortion rally. He has been so vocal in his support for the murder of innocent babies that I'm sure to many people, it appears that you can be both Catholic and pro-choice.
You can. Catholics for Choice exists. And who is Harrison to say what others can and can't believe?
He is not alone. From the man behind the COVID lockdowns to the people pushing dangerous gender ideologies onto the youth of America, they all have a glaring thing in common. They are Catholic. This is an important reminder that being Catholic alone doesn't cut it. These are the sorts of things we are told in polite society to not bring up. You know, the difficult and unpleasant things. But if we are going to be men and women for this time in history, we need to stop pretending that the Church of Nice is a winning proposition.
I am begging people to listen to what people like Harrison are saying. They don't want to live and let live. They don't want to play nice. They want to force their beliefs on society.
We must always speak and act in charity, but never mistake charity for cowardice. It is safe to say that over the past few years, I've gained quite the reputation for speaking my mind. I never envisioned myself nor wanted to have this sort of a platform, but God has given it to me, so I have no other choice but to embrace it and preach more hard truths about accepting your lane and staying in it.
To be clear, Harrison has to preach about people accepting and staying in their lane, but he gets multiple lanes. Father, husband, athlete, speaker, and preacher. I guess he must be God's chosen.
As members of the church founded by Jesus Christ, it is our duty and ultimately privilege to be authentically and unapologetically Catholic. Don't be mistaken, even within the church, people in polite Catholic circles will try to persuade you to remain silent. There even was an award-winning film called Silence, made by a fellow Catholic, wherein one of the main characters, a Jesuit priest, abandoned the church and as an apostate, when he died, is seen grasping a crucifix, quiet and unknown to anyone but God. As a friend of Benedictine College, His Excellency Bishop Robert Barron said in his review of the film, it was exactly what the cultural elite want to see in Christianity: private, hidden away, and harmless.
I don't think religion has to be hidden away, but I do think it's an incredibly private thing, which is why no one should try to force belief on non-believers. And why do Harrison and friends object to religion being harmless? What exactly do they think religion should be doing?
Our Catholic faith has always been countercultural. Our Lord, along with countless followers, were all put to death for their adherence to her teachings.
You can think I'm crazy, but I really do think Harrison and other people making speeches like this, whatever the occasion, are trying to normalize the idea of dying for your beliefs, even though there's no need to. No one is trying to make it illegal to be a Christian in the US. No one is going to ban the Bible. But somehow, the fact that not everyone believes the way these folks do, that they're not allowed to force everyone to follow their beliefs, that means they're under religious persecution and need to be prepared to die for Jesus.
The world around us says that we should keep our beliefs to ourselves whenever they go against the tyranny of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
The tyranny of diversity, equity, and inclusion? Does he even know what he just said, or is he just repeating buzzwords?
We fear speaking truth because now, unfortunately, truth is in the minority. Congress just passed a bill where stating something as basic as the biblical teaching of who killed Jesus could land you in jail.
When I looked this up, because I was pretty sure he got something wrong, I found an article from the Catholic Review fact-checking Harrison. On May 1, amid unrest on some college campuses across the country amid protests of the war in Gaza, the House passed the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act with broad bipartisan support in a 320-91 vote. As of May 16, the Senate has not yet taken up the bill, and its future in the upper chamber is uncertain. The bill would require the Department of Education to consider the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism in Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, a federal anti-discrimination law. The bill targets federal funding for colleges and universities that fail to restrict anti-Semitic behavior. Contrary to Butker's claim, the bill does not impose jail sentences on anyone, including for such behavior. The IHRA working definition, which the U.S. government adopted in 2019, and which according to the bill text has been used by the Department of Education since 2018, states that anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. Among the contemporary examples of anti-Semitism, the IHRA, of which the U.S. has been a member nation since 1998, cites is accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or group, or even for acts committed by non-Jews. While there is some debate over the legislation, some groups have raised free speech concerns, while others have argued it could unfairly restrict criticism of the Israeli government. The bill does not restrict the Bible or its contents. The definition of anti-Semitism the bill seeks to codify includes the phrase, using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism, e.g. claims of Jews killing Jesus or blood libel, to characterize Israel or Israelis as anti-Semitic. But the government has previously used the same definition. In 2019, then-President Donald Trump signed an executive order on combating anti-Semitism using the same definition as the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. Catholic magisterial teaching also rejects the assertion that the Jews collectively killed Christ. I've linked it below if you would like to read the article in full.
But make no mistake, before we even attempt to fix any of the issues plaguing society, we must first get our own house in order, and it starts with our leaders. The bishops and priests appointed by God as our spiritual fathers must be rightly ordered. There is not enough time today for me to list all the stories of priests and bishops misleading their flocks, but none of us can blame ignorance anymore and just blindly proclaim that that's what Father said. Because sadly, many priests we are looking to for leadership are the same ones who prioritize their hobbies or even photos with their dogs and matching outfits for the parish directory.
This sounds oddly specific.
It's easy for us laymen and women to think that in order for us to be holy, that we must be active in our parish and try to fix it. Yes, we absolutely should be involved in supporting our parishes, but we cannot be the source for our parish priests to lean on to help with their problems. Just as we look at the relationship between a father and his son, so too should we look at the relationship between a priest and his people. It would not be appropriate for me to always be looking to my son for help when it is my job as his father to lead him. St. Jose Maria Escriva states that priests are ordained to serve and should not yield to temptation to imitate lay people, but to be priests through and through. Tragically, so many priests revolve much of their happiness from the adulation they receive from their parishioners, and in searching for this, they let their guard down and become overly familiar. This undue familiarity will prove to be problematic every time because, as my teammate's girlfriend says, familiarity breeds contempt.
I know there were people upset about this, thinking that Harrison was trying to reduce Taylor Swift down to her relationship with a man, but I think he was trying to simultaneously show that he knows what the kids are into these days and make a joke about how much attention this relationship has received. However, when you believe that the most honorable thing for a woman is homemaking and the woman you're referencing is not a homemaker, it falls flat and gets taken in a very different way. Also, Taylor Swift did not invent familiarity breeds contempt.
St. Jose Maria continues that some want to see the priest as just another man. That is not so. They want to find in the priest those virtues proper to every Christian and indeed every honorable man: understanding, justice, a life of work, priestly work in this instance, and good manners. It is not prudent as the laity for us to consume ourselves in becoming amateur theologians so that we can decipher this or that theological teaching, unless, of course, you are a theology major. We must be intentional with our focus on our state in life and our own vocation. And for most of us, that's as married men and women.
Is it just me, or is he saying that lay people should just go about their lives and not concern themselves with theology? Let the clergy worry about that. Rather than have people read and comprehend for themselves, he would rather they just listen to what someone else tells them to believe? This is reminding me of Pearl's declaration that she's not so sure people should read the Bible because it just leads to woke churches.
Still, we have so many great resources at our fingertips that it doesn't take long to find traditional and timeless teachings that haven't been ambiguously reworded for our times. Plus, there are still many good and holy priests, and it's up to us to seek them out. The chaos of the world is unfortunately reflected in the chaos in our parishes, and sadly, in our cathedrals too. As we saw during the pandemic, too many bishops were not leaders at all. They were motivated by fear of being sued, fear of being removed, fear of being disliked.
Apparently, it's not possible that they were genuinely afraid people might get sick and die. Anyway, this next bit is going to be a bit dull, but I left it in for a reason.
They showed by their actions, intentional or unintentional, that the sacraments don't actually matter. Because of this, countless people died alone without access to the sacraments, and it's a tragedy we must never forget. As Catholics, we can look to so many examples of heroic shepherds who gave their lives for their people, and ultimately, the church. We cannot buy into the lie that the things we experienced during COVID were appropriate. Over the centuries, there have been great wars, great famines, and yes, even great diseases, all that came with a level of lethality and danger. But in each of those examples, church leaders leaned into their vocations and ensured that their people received the sacraments. Great saints like St. Damien of Malachi, who knew the dangers of his ministry, stayed for 11 years as a spiritual leader to the leper colonies of Hawaii. His heroism is looked at today as something set apart and unique, when ideally, it should not be unique at all. For as a father loves his child, so a shepherd should love his spiritual children too. That goes even more so for our bishops, these men who are present-day apostles. Our bishops once had adoring crowds of people kissing their rings and taking in their every word, but now relegate themselves to a position of inconsequential existence. Now, when a bishop of a diocese or the bishops' conference as a whole puts out an important document on this matter or that, nobody even takes a moment to read it, let alone follow it. No. Today, our shepherds are far more concerned with keeping the doors open to the chancery than they are with saying the difficult stuff out loud. It seems that the only time you hear from your bishops is when it's time for the annual appeal, whereas we need our bishops to be vocal about the teachings of the church, setting aside their own personal comfort and embracing their cross. Our bishops are not politicians, but shepherds. So instead of fitting in the world by going along to get along, they too need to stay in their lane and lead.
Was this part where he railed against the failures of Catholic leadership boring? Yes. But I left it into contrast against another part later on.
I say all of this not from a place of anger, as we get the leaders we deserve. But this does make me reflect on staying in my lane and focusing on my own vocation and how I can be a better father and husband and live in the world, but not be of it. Focusing on my vocation while praying and fasting for these men will do more for the church than me complaining about her leaders.
This isn't why I left that part in, but it is kind of funny he just finished complaining about Catholic leaders and then concluded that it would actually be more useful if he prayed and fasted for them.
Because there seems to be so much confusion coming from our leaders, there needs to be concrete examples for people to look to in places like Benedictine, a little Kansas college built high on a bluff above the Missouri River, are showing the world how an ordered, Christ-centered existence is the recipe for success. You need to look no further than the examples all around this campus, where over the past 20 years, enrollment has doubled, construction and revitalization are a constant part of life, and people, the students, the faculty and staff, are thriving. This didn't happen by chance. In a deliberate movement to embrace traditional Catholic values, Benedictine has gone from just another liberal arts school with nothing to set it apart to a thriving beacon of light and a reminder to us all that when you embrace tradition, success, worldly and spiritual, will follow. I am certain the reporters at the AP could not have imagined that their attempt to rebuke and embarrass places and people like those here at Benedictine wouldn't be met with anger, but instead met with excitement and pride. Not the deadly sin sort of pride that has an entire month dedicated to it.
So Catholics being proud is okay, but not anyone else. They have the right kind of pride. Everyone else is being proud wrong.
But the true God-centered pride that is cooperating with the Holy Ghost to glorify Him. Reading that article now shared all over the world, we see that in the complete surrender of self and a turning towards Christ, you will find happiness. Right here in a little town in Kansas, we find many inspiring lay people using their talents. President Minnis, Dr. Swafford, and Dr. Zimmerer are a few great examples right here on this very campus that will keep the light of Christ burning bright for generations to come. Being locked in with your vocation and staying in your lane is going to be the surest way for you to find true happiness and peace in this life. It is essential that we focus on our own state in life, whether that be as a layperson, a priest, or religious.
For someone so focused on other people staying in their lane, Harrison sure isn't. Maybe football players get a special dispensation to have multiple vocations.
Ladies and gentlemen of the class of 2024, you are sitting at the edge of the rest of your lives. Each of you has the potential to leave a legacy that transcends yourselves and this era of human existence. In the small ways, by living out your vocation, you will ensure that God's church continues and the world is enlightened by your example. For the ladies present today, congratulations on an amazing accomplishment. You should be proud of all that you have achieved to this point in your young lives. I want to speak directly to you briefly because I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you.
Someone once said they wanted more hot takes from me, so here's one. Conservatives, any flavor, keep repeating that women have been lied to because they think it will allow them to tap into the market of angry, vulnerable young women, and also foster an us versus them mentality, which seems to be a conservative favorite. Society says this, but we have the truth. We know the secret desires of your heart. We know what you really want. And this is especially effective when you're young and not entirely sure what you want or what your future will look like. For a lot of young people, that can be overwhelming, and someone just telling you the answer can sound appealing, especially if they also tell you you'll be a rebel, you'll be countercultural, you'll be a threat. A lot of young people like to be edgy. They like to think they're doing something different, something that people don't want them to do, which probably explains the smugness of trad wives now that I'm thinking about it.
How many of you are sitting here now about to cross this stage and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you are going to get in your career?
My guess would be that they're not assuming success and are actually anxious about finding that first job.
Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world. I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say that her life truly started when she began living her vocation as a wife and as a mother. I'm on this stage today and able to be the man I am because I have a wife who leans into her vocation. I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated that all of my success is made possible because a girl I met in band class back in middle school would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker. She's the primary educator to our children. She's the one who ensures I never let football or my business become a distraction from that of a husband and father. She's the person that knows me best at my core, and it is through our marriage that, Lord willing, we will both attain salvation. I say all of this to you because I have seen it firsthand, how much happier someone can be when they disregard the outside noise and move closer and closer to God's will in their life. Isabel's dream of having a career might not have come true, but if you asked her today if she has any regrets on her decision, she would laugh out loud without hesitation and say, heck no.
If any Catholics would like to share how they feel about that speech, please feel free to do so below. I have to say I found it odd and disrespectful. You're addressing university graduates at their graduation, and after a bizarre culture war rant, you tell the women, congratulations, but I bet you're most excited about marriage and babies, and then you talk about how your wife has no regrets over giving up her potential career to support you. There's nothing wrong with being a homemaker, but time and place. Also, weird assumption to put on a bunch of strangers.
As a man who gets a lot of praise and has been given a platform to speak to audiences like this one today, I pray that I always use my voice for God and not for myself. Everything I am saying to you is not from a place of wisdom, but rather a place of experience. I am hopeful that these words will be seen as those from a man not much older than you, who feels it is imperative that this class, this generation, and this time in our society must stop pretending that the things we see around us are normal. Heterodox ideas abound even within Catholic circles, for let's be honest, there is nothing good about playing God with having children, whether that be your ideal number or the perfect time to conceive. No matter how you spin it, there is nothing natural about Catholic birth control.
And not only did he tell you that homemaking is the most important vocation for a woman, if you want or plan to limit the amount of kids you have or space when you have them, that is not only wrong, it's also unnatural.
It is only in the past few years that I have grown encouraged to speak more boldly and directly, because as I mentioned earlier, I have leaned into my vocation as a husband and father, and as a man. To the gentlemen here today, part of what plagues our society is this lie that has been told to you that men are not necessary in the home or in our communities. As men, we set the tone of the culture, and when that is absent, disorder, dysfunction, and chaos set in. This absence of men in the home is what plays a large role in the violence we see all around the nation. Other countries do not have nearly the same absentee father rates as we find here in the US, and a correlation could be made in their drastically lower violence rates as well.
Correlation isn't causation, and Harrison should know that. He should also know that there are other countries in the world besides those in the global north.
Be unapologetic in your masculinity, fighting against the cultural emasculation of men. Do hard things. Never settle for what is easy. You might have a talent that you don't necessarily enjoy, but if it glorifies God, maybe you should lean into that over something that you might think suits you better. I speak from experience as an introvert who now finds myself as an amateur public speaker and an entrepreneur, something I never thought I'd be when I received my industrial engineering degree. The road ahead is bright. Things are changing, society is shifting, and people young and old are embracing tradition.
So, women, sure, you can have a career, but the most important vocation is homemaker. And men, you use your gifts to glorify God. You set the tone of the culture. You go out and make things happen, while the women quietly toil in the background. I know people will say, he didn't tell women they couldn't do other things, and that's true, but let's be honest. He did tell women that homemaking was the most important thing they could do. He did tell them that limiting or spacing children was unnatural. And do you honestly think the average couple could have 3, 4, or however many kids and both parents remain employed full-time? Something will have to give. And that something is usually the woman, especially in circles like these. Harrison said it himself when he noted that his wife gave up her potential career to support him. And most of these women will not be marrying NFL football players with NFL money.
Not only has it been my vocation that has helped me and those closest to me, but not surprising to many of you, should be my outspoken embrace of the traditional Latin Mass.
I love how so little time was spent speaking to and about the graduates, and the rest has been spent pushing his own agenda. Is that normal for a graduation speech?
I've been very vocal in my love and devotion to the TLM and its necessity for our lives. But what I think gets misunderstood is that people who attend the TLM do so out of pride or preference. I can speak to my own experience, but for most people I have come across within these communities, this simply is not true. I do not attend the TLM because I think I am better than others, or for the smells and bells, or even for the love of Latin. I attend the TLM because I believe, just as the God of the Old Testament was pretty particular in how he wanted to be worshiped, the same holds true for us today. It is through the TLM that I encountered order and began to pursue it in my own life. Aside from the TLM itself, too many of our sacred traditions have been relegated to things of the past, when in my parish, things such as Ember Days, days when we fast and pray for vocations and for our priests, are still adhered to. The TLM is so essential that I would challenge each of you to pick a place to move where it is readily available. A lot of people have complaints about the parish or the community, but we should not sacrifice the Mass for community. I prioritize the TLM even if the parish isn't beautiful, the priest isn't great, or the community isn't amazing. I still go to the TLM because I believe the holy sacrifice of the Mass is more important than anything else. I say this knowing full well that when each of you rekindle your knowledge and adherence to many of the church's greatest traditions, you will see how much more colorful and alive your life can and should be.
This is why I left his rant about Catholic leaders in. I just found it so interesting that first, he plants the seed about how Catholic leadership is basically failing in their duties. And then, after a brief detour, he returns to push his preference, the Latin Mass. You should move if you have to, don't mind the cost, doesn't matter if you don't like the parish or priest, your life will just dramatically improve if you follow the Latin Mass, instead of the regular wishy-washy Catholic stuff.
As you move on from this place and enter into the world, know that you will face many challenges. Sadly, I'm sure many of you know of the countless stories of good and active members of this community who, after graduation and moving away from the Benedictine bubble, have ended up moving in with their boyfriend or girlfriend prior to marriage. Some even leave the church and abandon God. It is always heartbreaking to hear these stories, and there is a desire to know what happened and what went wrong. What you must remember is that life is about doing the small things well, setting yourself up for success, and surrounding yourself with people who continually push you to be the best version of you. I say this all the time, that iron sharpens iron.
Is this a Catholic thing? I've covered 2 episodes of the Masculine Revival podcast, and they say this as well, and use it to sell their brotherhood. One, possibly both, of them has also converted to Catholicism.
It's a great reminder that those closest to us should be making us better. If you are dating someone who doesn't even share your faith, how do you expect that person to help you become a saint? If your friend group is filled with people who only think about what you're doing next weekend and are not willing to have those difficult conversations, how can they help sharpen you? As you prepare to enter into the workforce, it is extremely important that you actually think about the places you are moving to. Who is the bishop? What kind of parishes are there? Do they offer the TLM and have priests who embrace their priestly vocation? Cost of living must not be the only arbiter of your choices, for a life without God is not a life at all, and the cost of salvation is worth more than any career.
So people should move to be near a Latin Mass, regardless of how they feel about the place itself and regardless of the cost, and they should also have as many kids as the Lord wills? Harrison seems a bit out of touch with reality.
I'm excited for the future, and I pray that something I have said will resonate as you move on to the next chapter of your life. Never be afraid to profess the one holy, Catholic, and apostolic church, for this is the church that Jesus Christ established, through which we receive sanctifying grace. I know that my message today had a little less fluff than is expected for these speeches, but I believe that this audience and this venue is the best place to speak openly and honestly about who we are and where we all want to go, which is heaven. I thank God for Benedictine College and for the example it provides to the world. I thank God for men like President Minnis who are doing their part for the kingdom. Come to find out, you can have an authentically Catholic college and a thriving football program. Make no mistake, you are entering into mission territory in a post-God world, but you were made for this, and with God by your side and a constant striving for virtue within your vocation, you too can be a saint. Christ is King to the heights.
He did get a standing ovation, but I wonder if that was for the speech itself or for that last statement. Regardless, I'm not just a heathen hater. The Benedictine Sisters of Mount St. Scholastica issued a statement. As a founding institution and sponsor of Benedictine College, the Sisters of Mount St. Scholastica find it necessary to respond to the controversial remarks of Harrison Butker as commencement speaker. Statement in response to the 2024 Benedictine College Commencement Address. The Sisters of Mount St. Scholastica do not believe that Harrison Butker's comments in his 2024 Benedictine College Commencement Address represent the Catholic Benedictine liberal arts college that our founders envisioned and in which we have been so invested. Instead of promoting unity in our church, our nation, and the world, his comments seem to have fostered division. One of our concerns was the assertion that being a homemaker is the highest calling for a woman. We sisters have dedicated our lives to God and God's people, including the many women whom we have taught and influenced during the past 160 years. These women have made a tremendous difference in the world in their roles as wives and mothers and through their God-given gifts in leadership, scholarship, and their careers. Our community has taught young women and men not just how to be homemakers in a limited sense, but rather how to make a gospel-centered, compassionate home within themselves where they can welcome others as Christ, empowering them to be the best versions of themselves. We reject a narrow definition of what it means to be Catholic. We are faithful members of the Catholic Church who embrace and promote the values of the Gospel, Saint Benedict, and Vatican II, and the teachings of Pope Francis. We want to be known as an inclusive, welcoming community embracing Benedictine values that have endured for more than 1,500 years and have spread through every continent and nation. We believe those values are the core of Benedictine College. We thank all who are supportive of our Mount community and the values we hold. With St. Benedict, we pray, let us prefer nothing whatever to Christ, and may he lead us all together to life everlasting. Catholic Review and nuns, I don't think it's just feminists that have a problem. And this is concerning in general. Harrison isn't alone. Taylor Marshall, another Catholic, put out his 12-point Christ is King platform last year, and I think both of them would be at home with Project 2025. And is it just me, or is this sort of talk, men change culture, women change diapers, becoming more common? Final thoughts, it was weird and it was inappropriate. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.